Beneath the waves, entire chapters of human history lie perfectly preserved. This is the realm of underwater archaeology, where lost cities offer a direct portal to our past. By the end of this exploration, you will have journeyed to 30 sunken settlements from across the globe, each with a story silenced by the sea. We will visit a luxurious Roman resort frozen in a bay, and a Chinese metropolis sacrificed to a modern reservoir. What can a city drowned by an earthquake in 1692 tell us about pirate life? How does a Neolithic village, submerged for over 8,000 years, change our view of early farmers? These underwater sites are not just ruins, they are time capsules, and they challenge everything we assume about the permanence of civilization. When you think of a lost world, what is the first image that surfaces in your mind? This work begins not with a single dive, but with a careful sweep of technology across the dark seafloor. Side-scan sonar acts like an acoustic paintbrush, sending out pulses of sound that return detailed images of the landscape below, revealing unnatural shapes hidden in the mud. Magnetometers detect faint disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field, often signaling the presence of buried metal objects, from ancient tools to ship fastenings. For sites too deep or dangerous for prolonged human presence, remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, become the eyes and hands of the team, equipped with lights, cameras, and delicate manipulator arms to investigate without ever causing a disturbance. This non-invasive approach is a core principle, for these sites are as fragile as they are ancient. The goal is to map, to document, to understand the context of every artifact before anything is ever moved. It is a slow, patient science of seeing through the deep, and what it reveals is a preservation paradox. On land, organic materials like wood, leather, and fabric typically decay within centuries. But submerged in cold, dark, low-oxygen environments, these same materials can enter a state of near-suspended animation. A wooden ship's hull, a woven basket, even seeds and remnants of meals can survive for millennia, sealed in a watery time capsule that land sites could never offer. This makes an underwater settlement a uniquely complete snapshot of daily life. The archaeologist here must therefore be a hybrid expert, reading sonar charts like maps, understanding sediment layers like a geologist, and interpreting the marine environment that both conceals and protects the past. It is this rigorous fusion of disciplines that transforms a murky ruin into a readable story, allowing us to step, virtually, into streets that have not felt sunlight for thousands of years. So as we explore these 30 sunken sites, remember that each one represents a monumental feat of modern detection, a puzzle solved one high-tech scan and one careful excavation at a time. 5,000 years ago, a bustling port town thrived where the Mediterranean Sea now gently covers its streets. Pavlopetri, resting just off the coast of Greece, is not merely old, it is the oldest submerged city ever discovered by archaeologists. Its foundations tell a story of sophisticated urban life from a time when many cultures were still in their earliest chapters. Walking its layout, even virtually, is to navigate a complete Bronze Age community. You can trace the main road, turn into side streets, and stand in the courtyards of homes and public buildings, all laid out with a clear sense of order and purpose. This is not a random collection of huts, it is a planned settlement, a blueprint for civilization etched into the seafloor. The preservation is so remarkable that researchers have mapped individual rooms and identified what might have been a central administrative building, suggesting a level of social organization we rarely get to witness from this distant era. What was life like in this sunken metropolis? The artifacts recovered from the silt provide the answers. Fragments of pottery, tools, and everyday items reveal a community deeply connected to a wider world. These objects show trade links stretching across the Aegean, connecting Pavlopetri to the powerful Minoan civilization of Crete and the rising Mycenaean culture of mainland Greece. It was a hub, a place where goods, ideas, and people converged long before the age of classical Athens. Then, one day, the ground shook. The submergence of Pavlopetri is attributed to seismic activity, a series of earthquakes that caused the land to sink, gradually allowing the sea to claim the city over time. This was not a violent, sudden catastrophe for its inhabitants, who likely had time to relocate, but it was a permanent farewell. The sea moved in, silencing the port but also sealing it in a protective embrace. The very event that erased it from the world also preserved it for hours, freezing a moment of Bronze Age daily life with a clarity that land-based ruins, weathered by wind and later settlement, can seldom match. Today, the clear waters offer a hauntingly beautiful view. Sunlight filters down to illuminate stone walls and pathways, creating a ghostly map of a community in perfect stillness. It serves as a profound reminder of the deep roots of urban living and the fragile line we all walk between permanence and memory, a theme that will echo through every settlement we explore from here. While Pavlopetri whispers of beginnings, another sunken city speaks of glorious heights. Off the coast of Egypt, where the Nile once met the Mediterranean, two legendary ports held a power that was both economic and divine. Heracleion and Canopus were not just cities, they were Egypt's grand front door to the wider ancient world, bustling hubs where Greek merchants, Egyptian priests, and traders from across the sea mingled. For centuries, they thrived as centers of commerce and pilgrimage, vital to the flow of grain, gold, and gods. Then, around the 8th century after the Common Era, the waters closed over them completely, and their locations faded into myth, remembered only in the writings of a few Greek historians. For over 1,000 years, they were considered little more than colorful legends, until the year 2000, when an underwater archaeologist named Frank Gaudio, working from a historical hunch, made a sweep with side-scan sonar in the Abu Qir Bay. The murky images that returned were unmistakable, the outlines of a lost world. The discovery was monumental, not merely for finding ruins, but for confirming history itself, transforming poetic accounts into tangible, stone proof on the seafloor. What emerged from the silt was a staggering collection of artifacts that mirrored the city's former splendor. Colossal statues of a pharaoh and a queen, each standing over 16 feet tall, were found toppled but perfectly preserved. A gold coin shimmered after centuries in the dark, a stela, or inscribed stone slab, bearing the decree of a pharaoh was recovered, its text still legible. Most telling were the remains of vast temple complexes, dedicated to the supreme god Ammon and the syncretic Greco-Egyptian deity Serapis. These finds painted a vivid picture of a society where immense wealth and deep spirituality were intertwined, a cosmopolitan crossroads where cultures and beliefs fused. But what could cause such powerful, stone-built cities to vanish? The answer lies in the very ground they were built upon. The Nile Delta is a landscape of soft, waterlogged clay, constantly shifting under the weight of what sits upon it. Experts believe a perfect storm of natural forces led to their sinking. Soil liquefaction, where solid ground temporarily behaves like a liquid during seismic activity, combined with a gradual rise in sea levels and the immense weight of the city's own stone monuments. Some evidence even points to a catastrophic tsunami as a final, triggering blow. The land simply could not hold, and these magnificent ports slid into the sea, layer by layer, over decades or perhaps even centuries. Their rediscovery does more than just add 2 entries to a map of lost cities. It rewires our understanding of ancient connectivity. Heracleion and Canopus stand as monumental evidence of a globalized ancient world, where empires were linked not by conquest alone, but by the steady, enduring currents of trade and shared belief, until the very earth beneath them decided to reclaim its due. The transition from myth to measurable stone is a journey the sea itself seems to facilitate. In the Gulf of Cambay off the western coast of India, the waters hold a sight that blurs this line entirely, a place where ancient scripture meets modern sonar. For millennia, Hindu texts have spoken of Dwarka, the magnificent fortified capital of the divine hero Lord Krishna, described as a city of great splendor that eventually sank beneath the ocean upon his departure from the world. It was a sacred story, a spiritual allegory, not a chapter expected in a history book. Then, in the late 20th century, marine archaeologists surveying the area began to detect anomalous structures on the seabed. What they documented was not a mythical city of gods, but the very real, physical remains of a lost human settlement. Large stone blocks, some arranged in geometric patterns suggesting walls and foundations, lay scattered across the seafloor. Pottery shards and other artifacts were recovered from the layers of silt, and scientific analysis of these materials, including carbon dating, pointed to a staggering possibility. This settlement showed signs of human activity stretching back at least 9,000 years. If these dates hold, it would fundamentally challenge established timelines, suggesting a sophisticated society with maritime capabilities existed on the Indian subcontinent millennia earlier than most conventional models proposed. This is where the discovery ignites a profound discussion. Is this sunken site the literal Dwarka of legend? Most scholars caution against a direct, one-to-one equation, viewing the scriptures as rich tapestries woven from cultural memory and spiritual insight rather than literal historical records. Yet the correlation is too compelling to dismiss. The location, the description of a prosperous port city, and its ultimate fate beneath the waves all find a strange echo in the archaeological evidence. What emerges is a more nuanced and fascinating idea that folklore and oral traditions are not mere fantasy. They can be vessels of long-term memory, preserving the core truth of a place, a people, or a catastrophic event across hundreds of generations. The submerged structures in the Gulf of Cambay may not be Krishna's celestial city, but they very likely represent the ancient, prosperous port that inspired its legend. This transforms the find from a simple archaeological site into a cultural bridge, showing how a society's greatest achievements and most traumatic losses can be encoded into story, passed down, and waiting for the day when technology allows us to find the physical proof resting in the silent dark. It is a powerful reminder that our oldest stories often begin with a grain of truth, a real place that time and the sea thought they had erased forever. The sea does not only claim the ancient, it also swallows the infamous with brutal suddenness. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the bustling English port of Port Royal, Jamaica, was shaken by a massive earthquake. Within minutes, the liquefied sand upon which the town was built gave way, and a series of tsunami waves finished the job, submerging roughly 2/3 of the city into the turquoise Caribbean. It was an event so precise and catastrophic that it became a fixed point in history, a moment where time itself seemed to stop for a notorious community known across the Atlantic as the wickedest city on Earth. This was no ordinary colonial outpost. It was the unofficial capital of piracy, a lawless haven where buccaneers like Henry Morgan operated with tacit government approval, spending their plundered wealth in a riot of taverns, brothels, and gambling dens. The earthquake was interpreted by many as divine judgment, a fitting end for a sinkhole of iniquity. But for underwater archaeologists, the disaster created something far more valuable than a moral lesson. It forged an unparalleled time capsule. The same silty, oxygen-poor clay that swallowed the city also sealed it in a state of remarkable preservation, locking away the raw, unfiltered reality of 17th century life in the brutal Atlantic world. Excavations have not just found ruins, they have encountered moments frozen mid-catastrophe. Buildings stand with walls intact, some still containing the personal effects of those who fled or were lost. Among the most poignant discoveries is a pocket watch, its hands forever stopped at 17 minutes past 11, marking the precise instant the earthquake struck. This single object transforms a historical event from a dated entry in a logbook into a visceral, human experience. But the site tells a broader story than sudden destruction. The material culture recovered from the mud paints a detailed portrait of a global trading hub. Chinese porcelain, Spanish silver coins, English clay pipes, and fine glassware from Europe all mingle in the strata, illustrating the vast network of legal and illicit trade that fueled the port's prosperity. We see the everyday objects of sailors, merchants, craftsmen, and enslaved individuals, from simple leather shoes to delicate jewelry, offering a democratized view of colonial society often missing from written records. Port Royal's legacy is therefore a double-edged sword. It provides an archaeological snapshot of unparalleled clarity, a direct window into the sights, sounds, and textures of a pivotal era. Yet it also stands as a stark monument to impermanence, a reminder that the most vibrant and seemingly permanent human endeavors rest on foundations both geological and moral that can vanish in an instant. The city's wickedness is part of its story, but its true gift to us is a perfectly preserved cross-section of a world in motion, suddenly and forever stilled by the sea. 8,000 years of silence rests on the seafloor off the coast of Israel. Atlit Yam is not a city of stone monuments, but a village of profound firsts, a Neolithic community that whispers the very origins of settled human life before the sea gently took it back. Here, time stretches to a scale that makes even ancient ports feel modern, connecting us directly to a pivotal revolution, the moment our ancestors began to transition from nomadic hunting and gathering to building permanent homes, cultivating crops, and raising animals. This submerged settlement is a preserved slice of that experimental, foundational chapter. Walking through its layout, archaeologists have mapped simple stone houses, circular foundations that once held families, and a network of paved pathways connecting them. But it is the site's quieter features that speak volumes about the inner world of these early people. Mysterious stone circles, large megaliths arranged with clear intent, rise from the seabed. Their exact purpose remains a topic of study, but many researchers interpret them as ritual structures, spaces for ceremony or communal gathering. This suggests that alongside the practical work of farming and building, there was a parallel need to make meaning, to connect with forces beyond the daily grind, establishing a spiritual landscape as important as the physical one. Perhaps most telling, however, are the stone-built wells discovered at the site. These were not mere holes in the ground, but sophisticated, lined constructions that tapped into the freshwater table. They represent a brilliant adaptation, a technological solution to the challenge of living near the coast where freshwater could be scarce. They show a society not just reacting to its environment, but actively engineering it for survival, a hallmark of the new sedentary lifestyle. Evidence of domesticated animals like sheep and goats and the processing of grains completes the picture of a community fully invested in the agricultural revolution. Yet, this village also holds a more somber record. Studies of the individuals found at the site have revealed the oldest known genetic evidence of tuberculosis in human remains. This finding is handled with great respect by researchers, who see it not as a graphic detail but as a significant scientific clue. It offers a quiet insight into the health challenges of these earliest close-knit communities, where living in proximity to livestock and one another created new vulnerabilities. It reminds us that the shift to farming was not an unalloyed triumph, but a complex trade-off with profound consequences for human well-being. Ultimately, the story of Atlit Yam is a story of gradual retreat, not sudden catastrophe. Its submergence is linked to the steady, unstoppable rise in sea levels that followed the last ice age. As the glaciers melted, the Mediterranean crept inland, foot by foot over generations. The villagers likely watched as their wells became brackish, as their fields grew salt-poisoned, as the coastline they depended on slowly transformed. They would have adapted until they could adapt no more, eventually gathering their belongings and moving to higher ground, leaving their homes to the sea. This makes Atlit Yam a powerful testament to humanity's long relationship with environmental change. It shows that our earliest settled societies were already deeply connected to and dependent upon a stable climate, and that displacement by the waters is not a modern fear, but an ancient, recurring chapter in the human story. The village silent stones are a memorial to resilience, to adaptation, and to the difficult choices our ancestors made in the face of a rising world. Marble statues stand guard in silent hallways, their gaze fixed on schools of fish where Roman senators once strolled. This is Baiae, the legendary pleasure resort of the Roman elite, now resting in the shallow, sun-dappled waters of the Bay of Naples. It was not a sudden cataclysm that claimed this place, but a slow, breath-like movement of the earth itself. The entire region sits atop the Campi Flegrei, a restless volcanic caldera. Here, the ground doesn't just shake, it breathes in a process called bradyseism, where the land gradually rises and sinks over decades due to magma shifting deep below. Over centuries, this slow exhale allowed the Mediterranean to seep into Baiae's streets, submerging its most luxurious districts in a gentle, inexorable embrace. What remains below is not a ruin in the traditional sense, but a sunken museum of ancient decadence. Swimmers today can glide over intricate black and white mosaic floors that once adorned sprawling villas. They can pass through the arched portals of bath complexes, where heated pools were fed by natural thermal springs, a key attraction for the wealthy seeking restoration. Most striking are the marble sculptures, figures of gods, emperors, and mythical beings, now colonized by soft algae, standing as serene sentinels in their aquatic gallery. This underwater landscape offers a direct, tangible connection to the pinnacle of Roman opulence. Historical accounts describe Baiae as a resort of unparalleled luxury and sometimes scandal, a place where emperors like Nero and Caligula retreated for leisure, and where political deals were made amidst the steam of the baths. The submerged ruins confirm every ounce of that reputation. To explore them is to understand that Roman power was expressed not only in conquest and law, but in the mastery of leisure, in the creation of spaces designed purely for sensory pleasure and social display. Yet Baiae's fate is a powerful lesson in geological scale. The same volcanic forces that provided its prized hot springs and fertile land were also its undoing. The community lived quite literally on the back of a sleeping giant, benefiting from its warmth until the giant shifted in its sleep. This creates a poignant contrast, the ultimate fragility of human grandeur against the slow, unstoppable rhythms of the planet. The statues and mosaics we see today, preserved by the very water that flooded them, speak of an empire that believed in its own permanence, built in marble and concrete. But the seafloor upon which they rest tells a different, older story, one of a dynamic Earth that operates on a timetable far beyond human empires or their most extravagant parties. Baiae thus becomes a dual monument, a celebration of artistic achievement and hedonistic culture frozen in time, and a humbling reminder that the ground beneath our feet is never truly still. While Baiae was claimed by the Earth's slow breath, another city was surrendered by human hands. In the lush hills of Zhejiang Province, China, a magnificent metropolis known as Shicheng, the Lion City, was deliberately drowned. In the year 1959, the Chinese government made a momentous decision to construct a new hydroelectric power station, a project that required the creation of a massive reservoir. The valley where Lion City had stood for centuries was chosen to be flooded. This was not an act of nature, but a calculated sacrifice for modern progress. The residents were relocated, their homes emptied, and then the waters of the newly formed Qingdao Lake were allowed to rise, slowly and silently submerging an architectural treasure that dated back to the Ming and Qing dynasties. For decades, the city was largely forgotten, a secret kept by the deep, calm freshwater. Then, in the early 2000s, renewed interest and advanced diving expeditions revealed a site that left archaeologists speechless. The cold, dark waters, with their exceptional clarity, had acted as a perfect preservative. Lion City was not a ruin, it was a masterpiece in suspended animation. Intricately stone carvings of lions, dragons, and phoenixes adorn archways and temple facades, their details as sharp as the day they were cut. 5 monumental city gates still stand watch over silent, paved streets. Ornate wooden beams from grand houses and public buildings remain in place, untouched by the rot that would have consumed them on land. To dive through its streets is to fly through a ghostly, inverted museum, where the artistry of 500 years ago is displayed in an eerie blue-green gallery. This preservation creates a profound and bittersweet paradox. The very act that erased Lion City from the living world also saved it from the ravages of time, pollution, and modern development that have altered so many historical sites on land. It is a perfectly preserved snapshot of late imperial Chinese urban design and craftsmanship, a gift to archaeologists that came at the cost of displacing a living community and silencing a continuous cultural heartbeat. The city forces us to confront a difficult modern question. What do we choose to submerge in the name of development? The reservoir brought electricity, irrigation, and economic growth to the region, undeniable benefits for thousands. Yet it also required the loss of a tangible connection to the past, a physical place where history was written in stone and wood. Lion City does not offer easy answers, but it makes the weight of such choices unmistakably clear. It stands as a monument to what we gain and to what we must knowingly let go, a hauntingly beautiful reminder that progress often writes its history in the landscapes it floods. The legend spoke of a city drowned for its arrogance, a place of golden spires and sinful pride swallowed by the wrathful sea. For centuries, the story of Rungholt, a wealthy medieval port in Germany's Wadden Sea, was considered just that, a powerful moral fable told to children about the dangers of hubris. It was said the town's inhabitants, flush with wealth from trade, mocked a beggar, and in response, a catastrophic storm surge in 1362 erased them from the map as divine punishment. This tale persisted in local folklore, a ghost story whispered about the vast, muddy tidal flats. Then, modern archaeology began to listen. Using sophisticated geomagnetic surveys and sediment core analysis, researchers have recently mapped the undeniable truth beneath the silt. The outlines of a substantial settlement emerged, complete with the foundations of longhouses, complex systems of drainage ditches, and the distinct, rectangular footprint of a church. Rungholt was real. This confirmation transforms a mythical cautionary tale into a tangible human tragedy. The town was part of a network of trading communities built on fertile marshland, known as Utland or outlands. These settlers were ambitious, reclaiming land from the sea with dikes and drainage to create prosperous farmland and a bustling port. Their wealth was not born of sin, but of remarkable engineering and commerce. The storm of 1362, later known as the Great Drowning of Men, was not an act of godly retribution, but a devastating natural disaster. A combination of a powerful North Sea tempest and a high tide overwhelmed their defensive dikes, flooding the low-lying settlement completely. The discovery of the church site is particularly telling, a sobering counterpoint to the legend of a godless people. It signifies a community that invested in a spiritual anchor, a place of gathering and faith that ultimately could not protect them from the physical force of the water. Rungholt's story, therefore, is not one of morality but of vulnerability. It illustrates the perennial, precarious balance between human ambition and coastal fragility. These medieval settlers pushed the boundaries of where they could live, mastering the wetlands until the sea, with a single furious surge, reclaimed its territory. Their fate echoes forward through centuries, a poignant and urgent reminder that the threat to coastal communities is not a relic of folklore, but a persistent geological reality, one that resonates with increasing urgency in our own era of rising seas. The debate between nature and human hands finds its most dramatic stage in the clear waters off Japan's Yonaguni Island. Here, resting nearly 90 feet below the surface, lies a colossal rock formation that has divided experts and captivated the public for decades. Known as the Yonaguni Monument, its sheer scale is humbling, a structure the size of a large pyramid rising from the seabed. What makes it so controversial are its uncanny features: massive flat terraces that look like sunken plazas, sharp, straight edges meeting at what seem to be perfect 90-degree angles, and formations that resemble wide staircases, pillars, and even a triangular archway. To the untrained eye, it is impossible not to see the handiwork of a lost civilization, a sunken temple complex from a forgotten age. The most compelling arguments for a human origin point to these precise geometries, which appear consistently across the structure, and to features like two round holes that align perfectly, which some suggest could have held monumental pillars. Proponents of this theory argue that the monument could be a remnant of a culture from the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower and this area was dry land, potentially making it over 10,000 years old. This idea taps into a deep human fascination, the possibility of an advanced society erased from history, waiting to be rediscovered. Yet, the majority of geologists and mainstream archaeologists offer a different, though no less fascinating, explanation. They point to the local bedrock, a type of sandstone known for fracturing along straight lines due to tectonic stresses. The powerful currents in the area, they argue, could then erode and undercut these fractures over millennia, creating the flat platforms, sharp drop-offs, and stacked blocks we see today. The seemingly perfect angles, they note, can occur naturally through the consistent forces of physics acting on uniform stone. Even the pillars and staircases could be the result of sections of rock shearing away along natural fault lines. This scientific perspective sees the monument not as a crafted ruin, but as a masterpiece of natural sculpture, a testament to the immense, slow-motion artistry of the Earth itself. So, where does the truth lie? The Yonaguni monument may never offer a definitive answer, and perhaps that is its greatest gift. It stands as the ultimate symbol of how the ocean obscures our certainties. In the dim blue light, our human pattern-seeking minds desperately try to impose order, to see architecture in the chaos of stone. The sea, in its ancient silence, holds onto the secret. Whether it is a monument to human ambition or a monument to geological time, its power is undeniable. It forces us to question our assumptions, to marvel at the ambiguity of the deep, and to remember that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but wonders to be contemplated. The clear, shallow waters of Crete hold a sunken city you can literally swim through. Olous was once a powerful Dorian port, its fortunes rising and falling with the turbulent history of the island itself. Founded on a narrow isthmus, the city thrived for centuries, a hub of trade and culture that bore the marks of every era, from the lingering influence of the ancient Minoans to the imposing order of the Roman Empire. Its story is one of gradual disappearance, not a single cataclysm but a slow, seismic sinking of the land, as the earth along the coastline steadily subsided over time. This gentle descent allowed the sea to claim the city piece by piece, leaving its ruins in the impossibly clear turquoise waters of Olaunda Bay. Today, this creates an extraordinary opportunity, for Olous is arguably one of the world's most accessible underwater archaeological sites. With just a mask and snorkel, anyone can glide over the visible remains of ancient walls and building foundations laid out like a ghostly blueprint on the sandy bottom. The experience is profoundly direct, a personal encounter with antiquity that bypasses museum glass and offers a physical, almost tactile connection to the past. Among the most evocative features is a submerged cemetery where stone-lined graves rest silently in the aquatic light. Researchers approach such sites with deep respect, studying them to understand the community's customs and how they honored their loved ones. For a visitor, it is a place for quiet reflection on the continuity of human experience, a reminder that these waters connect us to generations that lived, worked, and built here long ago. The accessibility of Olous is its greatest teaching tool. It democratizes archaeology, allowing the public to become witnesses to history rather than passive consumers of it. This engagement is vital, fostering a broader appreciation for our shared heritage and the delicate work of preserving it. The city's visible ruins tell a silent but powerful story of adaptation and resilience, of a community that navigated the shifting tides of political power and geological change until the sea finally invited itself to stay. To swim over Olous is to understand that history is not always buried deep or locked away. It is sometimes right there, shimmering just beneath the surface, waiting for us to look down and remember. High in the thin air of the Andes, where the sky meets the water, Lake Titicaca holds secrets in its profound depths. This immense, high-altitude lake, straddling the border of Bolivia and Peru, has been considered sacred for millennia, a living entity in the cosmology of the cultures that thrived on its shores. For the Tiwanaku, a powerful pre-Inca civilization that flourished over 1,000 years ago, the lake was not merely a resource. It was a divine ancestor, the very origin place of the world. Recent sonar surveys of its floor have revealed anomalies that echo this profound reverence, what appear to be submerged terraced structures and the outline of a possible temple, resting silently in the cold, dark water. These are not the remains of a city claimed by a sudden cataclysm, but likely sites of immense spiritual significance that were gradually enveloped as the lake's own levels naturally rose and fell over centuries. Imagine a ceremonial platform, a place where priests once conducted rituals under the open sky, now lying 40 feet below the surface, visited only by aquatic life. The discovery points to a practice of deliberate ritual deposition where precious offerings were made to the lake deities. Divers have indeed recovered artifacts from these submerged zones, including finely carved stone boxes, ceremonial incense burners, and fragments of gold and shell, items of great value placed into the water as gifts. This transforms our understanding of the site. It suggests the Tiwanaku saw the lake not as a barrier, but as a sacred realm to be engaged with directly, a liquid temple where the boundary between the human world and the divine was purposefully blurred. To comprehend this, we must shift our perspective entirely. In the Andean worldview, water is not separate from the land. It is a vital, animate force. Mountains are considered deities, and the lakes at their feet are their tears or their life-giving essence. A structure submerged by the lake was not lost. It was intentionally brought closer to the source of power, or perhaps reclaimed by it as part of a natural, sacred cycle. Exploring these potential pyramids and temples beneath Titicaca is therefore less about finding a drowned city and more about mapping a spiritual landscape. It helps us understand how a civilization encoded its deepest beliefs into the very environment, building their places of worship in dialogue with the water's edge, knowing full well that the water might one day rise to claim them. This acceptance speaks to a harmony with nature that is deeply philosophical, viewing change not as destruction, but as a form of communion. The silent structures on the sonar readout are a testament to a culture that saw the divine in the depth and the flow, reminding us that sometimes the most sacred spaces are those we willingly surrender to the elements. The sea's embrace has claimed cities of pleasure, piety, and power, but it also preserves the blueprints of emerging empires. At the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, where the desert meets the Red Sea, the early Islamic port of Ayla conducted a symphony of commerce. Founded in the 7th century, shortly after the rise of Islam, this was a city built with ambition, designed to be a vital link in a new and expanding world. Its strategic position was everything, a gateway where goods from across the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean were transferred to caravans bound for the interior, feeding the economic lifeblood of distant capitals. For centuries, Ayla thrived as a cosmopolitan hub, a place where diverse cultures converged under the banner of a flourishing civilization. Then the ground shifted. Tectonic activity along the Great Rift Valley, combined with the relentless, gradual rise of sea levels, allowed the waters of the Gulf to advance. Portions of the city were slowly inundated, its streets and structures sinking into the saline embrace, a fate shared by so many coastal settlements across the ages. What makes Ayla's rediscovery so remarkable is not merely its historical importance, but the very fabric from which it was constructed. When archaeologists began their work, both on land and underwater, they uncovered walls and gateways built not from quarried stone or baked brick, but from the living reef itself. The builders of Ayla utilized the most abundant local material available, coral stone, harvesting it from the sea to build their city upon its shore. This architectural choice speaks volumes about adaptation and ingenuity. It shows a society intimately familiar with its marine environment, turning a challenging coastal landscape into a sustainable opportunity. The surviving plan of the city is equally significant. Ayla is laid out in a classic early Islamic design, a rectangular fortress with symmetrical gates and a central crossroads leading to a mosque. This orderly grid reflects a sophisticated approach to urban planning, emphasizing community, defense, and the integration of civic and religious life. To stand before its coral walls today, partly on land and partly submerged, is to witness a physical manifesto of a new era, a deliberate statement of permanence and faith written in the language of the local sea. Yet, the water that now filters through its foundations tells the other half of the story, one of geological inevitability. Ayla's partial submergence illustrates a powerful theme, that even well-documented, strategically vital cities are not immune to the planet's slow movements. Its economic and cultural significance, however, did not dissolve. Instead, it was translated into the archaeological record, preserved in the unique coral masonry and the artifacts resting in the silt. The port's legacy is thus a dialogue between human intention and environmental force, a reminder that our greatest creations are always in conversation with the world they are built upon, a conversation that sometimes ends with the gentle, undeniable whisper of the rising tide. The water does not only guard the ancient, it also holds the echoes of a past within living memory. In the rolling hills of South Carolina, Lake Murray stretches out as a serene, man-made expanse, a popular spot for boating and recreation. Yet beneath its placid surface lie the foundations of a different world, a collection of sunken villages that tell a story not of geological fate, but of 20th century choice. In the 1930s, a massive dam was built across the Saluda River to generate hydroelectric power, a project emblematic of the New Deal era's drive for modern infrastructure. The valley slowly filled with water, deliberately and irrevocably submerging entire communities. Churches where congregations once gathered, family cemeteries, farmsteads, and country stores all disappeared beneath the rising reservoir, their residents relocated, their geography rewritten by concrete and current. These are not ruins from a distant millennium, they are losses felt within generations. Descendants of those displaced families still hold stories and photographs, a tangible personal connection that makes this submerged history feel immediate and poignant. Unlike the mythical aura surrounding Atlantis or Rungholt, the story of Lake Murray's villages is documented, remembered, and often tinged with the complex emotions of progress. The creation of the lake brought jobs, electricity, and economic growth to the region, undeniable benefits that shaped modern South Carolina. But it came at the cost of a rooted way of life, a trade-off between collective advancement and individual place that communities across the world have faced. What makes this site uniquely powerful is its periodic reappearance. During seasons of severe drought, when water levels drop significantly, the lake reluctantly gives up its secrets. Ghostly foundations re-emerge, old stone walls and fence lines materialize from the mud, and the gravestones of forgotten cemeteries stand once more in the open air. These moments offer a haunting glimpse into early 20th century rural America, a world of hardscrabble farms and close-knit hamlets that was, quite literally, paved over by a lake. To walk these exposed ruins is to confront a very modern kind of archaeology, where the artifacts are not pottery shards but concrete steps, rusted farm equipment, and the echoes of decisions made less than a century ago. The sunken villages of Lake Murray serve as a sobering monument to the weight of infrastructure. They remind us that progress often requires a sacrifice, a submersion of one reality to make way for another. The lake itself is now a cherished feature of the landscape, its benefits woven into daily life. Yet when the waters recede, the past quietly insists on being seen, prompting reflection on what we choose to preserve, what we consent to flood, and how the maps of our present are always drawn over the footprints of those who came before. It is a testament to memory's persistence, proving that even landscapes engineered for the future cannot fully silence the stories resting just beneath the surface. A different kind of flood reshaped the landscape of eastern Canada in the 1950s. The St. Lawrence Seaway was a monumental engineering project, a joint venture between Canada and the United States to tame a river and create a deep shipping channel for ocean-going freighters. Its promise was one of prosperity, a direct artery for global trade that would fuel the economies of the Great Lakes region. But this progress required a price, paid not in money, but in geography and community. To raise the water levels and widen the channel, entire towns along the river's edge were slated for inundation. Places like Oldsville, with its tree-lined streets and sturdy brick buildings, and Iroquois, with its deep historical roots, were not lost to a natural disaster, but to a calculated, deliberate act of modern planning. The residents were bought out, their homes and public buildings were razed, and then the waters were allowed to rise, submerging the foundations of their lives beneath the new, engineered river. Today, the Seaway is a vital commercial corridor, its locks and channels humming with industry, a testament to human ambition over nature. Yet beneath that same water, another story lies preserved in concrete and stone. The grid of old roads, the footings of churches and schools, and the outlines of family properties remain on the riverbed, forming a submerged archaeological layer of the mid-20th century. This is not ancient history, it is a chapter within living memory, a modern mystery not of how it happened but of what it means. The lost villages are a memorial to a specific kind of 20th century transformation, where the drive for collective economic advancement directly confronted the value of rooted local place. Thousands of people were relocated, their social fabric intentionally unraveled and rewoven elsewhere, a profound social cost absorbed for a national vision. For archaeologists and historians, these sites present a unique challenge and opportunity. They are time capsules of a very recent past, preserving the material culture of post-war small-town Canada exactly as it was left. Studying them helps document the everyday life of an era we often assume we fully understand, offering insights that photographs and oral histories alone cannot provide. But more than that, they serve as a powerful, tangible metaphor for the choices of progress. When we look at the smooth surface of the seaway, we see efficiency and global connection. When we consider what lies beneath, we are reminded of the communities that were asked to make way for that vision. The lost villages do not represent a tragedy in the traditional sense, but a complex legacy of gain and loss, a quiet, submerged counter-narrative to the story of industrial triumph. They ask us to reflect on what we build, what we flood, and how the maps of our present are always drawn over the silent footprints of those who consented to vanish for a future they would never call home. The footprints are still there, pressed into the ancient peat as if their owner just walked away. Off the coast of Wales, near the village of Borth, a stark and haunting landscape emerges from the sea only during the lowest tides, revealing not the stones of a city, but the bones of an entire lost world. This is the submerged forest, a sprawling expanse of petrified tree stumps, their roots still gripping the clay of a vanished land. Over 4,500 years ago, this was not a seabed but a vibrant, wooded coastline, a rich hunting ground for Mesolithic people navigating a Britain still shaking off the last chill of the Ice Age. The forest's existence is a profound testament to a different shoreline, one that lay miles further out into what is now Cardigan Bay. As global temperatures warmed and glaciers melted, the sea began its long, relentless advance. Salt water slowly poisoned the freshwater ecosystem, killing the trees where they stood, and then layers of peat and marine silt covered them, sealing the scene in a remarkable state of preservation. This is not a settlement in the traditional sense of walls and houses, but something arguably more fundamental, a preserved slice of the environment that sustained human life. Among the tangled roots and fallen trunks, archaeologists have found the true treasure of Borth human footprints. These are not impressions in stone, but in the soft, ancient mud that hardened over millennia. A line of prints, perhaps from a small group, strides purposefully across what was once a riverbank or a game trail. Nearby, researchers have uncovered flint tools, finely worked scrapers and blades dropped or discarded by hunters stalking deer or wild boar through the dense woodland. These artifacts are silent but eloquent. They tell us that this was a place of activity, of survival, of daily life intimately tied to the rhythm of the forest and the coast. The power of Borth lies in this intimate connection between people and a changing planet. The Mesolithic inhabitants were not passive victims of the rising waters. They were highly adaptable nomads who followed the retreating coastline and the migrating herds. Their story is one of constant movement in harmony with and in response to environmental shifts. The submerged forest provides critical, tangible data on the speed and impact of prehistoric climate change, offering a direct analog to the coastal transgression we discussed today. It shows that the loss of land to the sea is not a future possibility, but a past reality that human communities have navigated for thousands of years. When the tides pull back and the grey Welsh light falls on those ancient footprints, we are granted a moment of breathtaking immediacy with a hunter from a world that no longer exists. We see not a ruin but a path, a single line of steps frozen in the moment of a journey across a landscape that the sea was patiently waiting to reclaim. It reminds us that history is written not only in grand monuments, but in the soft mud beneath our feet, and that the most profound stories are often those that leave no walls behind, only a trace of passage soon to be washed away again by the returning tide. A prosperous medieval town now lies buried beneath a vast, whispering salt marsh. Sicheng, once a thriving hub in the Scheldt estuary of the Netherlands, met its end not through slow geological change, but in a single, violent night of water and war. The year was 1584, a point deep within the brutal 80 Years' War, a conflict for Dutch independence. According to local legend, the town was cursed for its pride, its church bells ringing vainly as a punishment from the sea. The archaeological truth, however, uncovers a story far more strategic and human. Shicheng was likely the victim of a deliberate military decision, a catastrophic act of defensive flooding. To halt the advancing Spanish army, Dutch rebels are believed to have breached the protective dikes, unleashing the North Sea upon their own land. The water did not discriminate. It swallowed the enemy's advance along with towns, farms, and the entire future of Shicheng. This was not an act of nature alone, but of warfare that weaponized the landscape itself, turning the community's greatest protector, the system of dikes, into the instrument of its destruction. The floodwaters never fully receded. What was once fertile polder land became the Shicheng Marsh, a treacherous, tidal wilderness where the sea claims its due twice a day. Here, the past is not permanently hidden but revealed in fleeting, muddy glimpses. During extreme low tides, the marsh reluctantly yields its secrets: fragments of red brick from vanished houses, pieces of glazed pottery from a family's table, and the stubborn outlines of foundations emerge from the silt. For archaeologists, these brief windows are precious, confirming the historical records of a substantial settlement engaged in trade and agriculture. Each shard is a direct contradiction to the myth of a cursed city, pointing instead to a normal, vibrant community caught in the crossfire of a larger conflict. The legacy of Shicheng is therefore a layered one. It is a stark lesson in how geopolitical strife can permanently alter geography, sacrificing place for tactical gain. The decision to flood the land was a brutal calculation, trading a town for time, a home for a strategic barrier. That calculated loss created a new, wild ecosystem that exists to this day, a monument to the lasting power of a single wartime choice. The town's story lives on in the local folklore, a haunting narrative that tries to make moral sense of a senseless tragedy. But when the tide pulls out and the bricks appear, we are reminded that history is often written not in legends of pride and punishment, but in the cold, hard logic of conflict, and in the quiet, enduring evidence left behind in the mud. Far to the north, where summers are brief and winters are long, another lake holds monuments not of a city, but of the mind. In the vast, cold expanse of Lake Wonga in Russia, the seabed is dotted with mysterious stone formations, cairns, and intricate labyrinths built by Neolithic hands over 6,000 years ago. These are not the foundations of homes, but carefully arranged puzzles in stone, constructed on what was once dry land along the ancient shoreline. As the climate warmed and the lake level slowly rose, these ritual landscapes were gradually submerged, preserved in the dark, cold freshwater like artifacts in a natural museum. Their survival here, in one of the world's northernmost underwater sites, immediately challenges a common assumption that significant archaeological treasures are found only in the warm, clear waters of the Mediterranean or the tropics. Lake Wonga proves that profound human history is written in the cold, deep lakes of the subarctic as well. The purpose of these stone labyrinths remains one of prehistory's quiet enigmas. Researchers note that their locations often correspond with known spawning routes for fish, leading to a compelling theory that they may have been part of elaborate fishing rituals. By constructing these symbolic traps on land, perhaps the community believed they could spiritually influence the bounty of the lake, ensuring a successful catch for the season. Other interpretations suggest a cosmological function, the winding, unicursal paths representing a journey to another world or a map of the cosmos itself, a physical meditation on life, death, and rebirth laid out in stone. To encounter these structures today requires diving into near darkness where water temperatures hover just above freezing. The experience is less about viewing grand architecture and more about sensing profound intention. The effort required to gather and place each heavy stone in this harsh environment speaks to a powerful communal drive, a need to mark the landscape with meaning that transcended daily survival. These cairns and labyrinths are a testament to a deep spiritual relationship with an unforgiving environment. They show a culture not merely struggling to exist in the north, but actively seeking to understand its place within it, to negotiate with the forces of nature through ceremony and symbol. The cold water that now covers them did not destroy their meaning. It simply suspended it, offering modern researchers a uniquely intact glimpse into the ritual life of some of Europe's earliest northern communities. In their silent, geometric patterns, we see the universal human urge to create order from chaos, to build sacred puzzles whose answers are known only to the lake and the long-vanished hands that built them. Some of the most intimate time capsules are not sunken cities, but drowned islands built by hand. Scattered across the lochs of Scotland and the loughs of Ireland, crannogs are ancient artificial homesteads, circular dwellings constructed on platforms of timber, stone, and earth, deliberately placed in the water for security and status. These were not temporary shelters, but fortified family homes and centers of small-scale farming communities, occupied from the Neolithic period right through the early medieval era. Their strategic location in the water created a natural moat, offering protection from raiders and wild animals, while also placing the inhabitants at the heart of a rich aquatic resource network. Over centuries, as water levels fluctuated and shorelines changed, many of these island homes became fully or partially submerged, their wooden foundations sinking into the cold, dark, oxygen-poor silts of the lakebed. This environment, much like a peat bog, acts as a remarkable preservative. Where a land-based Iron Age site might yield only post holes and pottery fragments, a submerged crannog can offer a breathtakingly complete inventory of daily life. Archaeologists have recovered entire wooden walkways that connected the island to the shore, sections of roundhouse walls, and even thatching materials. But it is the smaller, more personal finds that truly bring the past to life. Exquisitely carved wooden bowls, combs, and tools lie as if just set down. Remnants of textiles, butter preserved in wooden containers, and the seeds of gathered plants paint a vivid picture of domestic economy and diet. These organic treasures, which would have vanished without a trace on land, survive in stunning detail, allowing us to reconstruct the rhythm of seasons, meals, and craftsmanship with unprecedented clarity. The crannogs also speak to social structure. Building and maintaining such an island required coordinated labor and access to resources, suggesting these were the homes of relatively prosperous families, perhaps minor chieftains or successful farmers. The effort invested in creating a defensible, prestigious home in the water speaks to a society where security and display were intertwined. The submergence of these sites was often a gradual process, linked to natural rising water levels or the eventual abandonment and collapse of the structures. Their legacy, however, is profound. They reveal a sophisticated adaptation to the landscape, a deep understanding of hydro-engineering long before the term existed. The crannog dwellers were not fleeing the water, they were harnessing it, using its protective embrace to create stable, sustainable communities. To study a crannog is to gain a household-level view of history, where the story is told not in grand monuments, but in a preserved wooden spoon, a fishing net weight, or the footprint of a home that chose the safety of the lake, only to be welcomed back by it centuries later. The ambition of a king can reshape a coastline. On the shores of ancient Judea, King Herod the Great demanded not just a port, but a statement of power, a gateway to the Roman world that would bear the emperor's name, Caesarea Maritima. Its crown jewel was an artificial harbor of staggering scale and innovation, a complex called Sebastos, one of the largest and most advanced harbors of the classical world. To achieve the impossible, building stable structures in the open sea, Herod's engineers employed a revolutionary material, hydraulic concrete. This was no ordinary mortar. It was a mixture that actually required seawater to cure and harden, allowing them to fabricate massive underwater foundations and breakwaters directly on the seabed. For a time, it worked brilliantly, creating a safe anchorage that turned Caesarea into a bustling cosmopolitan hub, a symbol of engineering triumph over the Mediterranean's moods. Today, while the grand city's theaters and palaces still stand impressively on land, the true testament to its ambition lies submerged: the colossal breakwaters, the submerged foundations of lighthouses, and the sunken floors of waterfront warehouses now rest on the seafloor, a ghostly blueprint of ancient maritime ambition visible to divers. This underwater landscape is not just a ruin, it is a forensic case study. Modern archaeological analysis has revealed that the harbor's eventual failure was, ironically, baked into its revolutionary design. The very concrete that made it possible contained a flaw. The mixture used volcanic ash that, over time, may not have bonded perfectly with the local materials, leading to weaknesses. Then, nature intervened decisively. A series of powerful earthquakes, followed by tsunamis, pounded the coast over the centuries. These seismic events likely exploited the structural vulnerabilities, causing sections of the breakwater to slump and collapse, allowing the relentless sea to infiltrate and silt up the once perfect harbor. The story of Caesarea's harbor, therefore, is a poignant lesson in scale and time. It represents the peak of ancient engineering ambition, a direct challenge to the sea's domain. Yet its submerged remains quietly testify to the ocean's patient, irresistible force. The sea could not be conquered permanently, only negotiated with, and even the most brilliant human technology could not withstand the cumulative pressure of geological time and the planet's restless shifts. To swim over these sunken blocks is to witness a dialogue between imperial will and natural law, a conversation that ended with the slow, silent victory of the waves. The Black Sea guards its past in absolute darkness. Unlike the sunlit ruins of the Mediterranean, its deepest secrets are kept in a zone where oxygen vanishes, a cold, anoxic layer that begins hundreds of feet down. In this strange, breathless environment, the normal processes of decay simply stop. Wooden ship hulls from antiquity lie on the seabed with their masts still standing, ropes coiled, and tool marks fresh, as if the crew departed only yesterday. This miraculous preservation extends to the most fragile organic materials, from leather goods to food remains, creating what is essentially a liquid time capsule of unparalleled quality. For archaeologists, these anoxic depths represent a frontier of almost unimaginable potential, a promise that entire chapters of early human history are waiting, intact in the silent dark. One of the most compelling ideas tied to this basin is a hypothesis that bridges geology and mythology. Around 5,600 years before the Common Era, as the last ice age receded, a natural dam holding back the massive freshwater lake that was the early Black Sea likely gave way at the Bosporus Strait. Salt water from the rising Mediterranean would have poured in with catastrophic force, a deluge that could have raised the shoreline by dozens of feet within a human lifetime. This event would have inundated coastal plains where Neolithic communities farmed and fished, forcing a rapid, permanent retreat. For generations of scholars and storytellers, this scenario presents a tantalizing possibility that such a traumatic, landscape-altering flood could have been woven into the cultural memory of the region's people, echoing down through millennia in the Great Flood narratives found in cultures from the Near East to the Mediterranean. While the search for definitive submerged villages from this era continues, the promise of the Black Sea itself is undeniable. Every perfectly preserved shipwreck discovered on its floor is more than a vessel. It is a snapshot of a trade route, a cargo list, and a moment in technological history. The potential for finding structures from that pivotal Neolithic period, when agriculture and permanent settlement were spreading across Europe, is what drives ongoing exploration. Advanced sonar mapping and remotely operated vehicles are slowly sketching a map of the ancient drowned coastline, searching for the telltale shapes of human habitation beneath the layers of sediment. To find a settlement preserved in the anoxic depths would be to open a window onto a lost world with a clarity no land site could ever provide, revealing the daily life of communities living at the very edge of a changing world. This environment does not just hold objects, it safeguards evidence of connection, of how people, ideas, and goods moved in a prehistoric world we are only beginning to understand. The dark waters of the Black Sea, therefore, are not merely a graveyard for ships, but a library for humanity, its pages written in wood, fiber, and bone, waiting for the light of discovery to finally read their story. The darkness of a cave deepens where the water begins. In the dense jungles of Guatemala, the sacred Maya site of Naj Tunish is a labyrinth of stone, but its most profound secrets are not on dry ground. This is not a city submerged by the sea, but a ceremonial portal deliberately linked to the water table, where archaeology must descend into the most challenging environment of all, the flooded cave. For the ancient Maya, caves and cenotes were not simply geological features. They were sacred openings to Xibalba, the watery underworld, a realm of powerful deities and ancestors. The very name Naj Tunish translates to stone house, hinting at its role as a dwelling place for the spiritual forces that governed life, death, and rebirth. Within its extensive chambers, archaeologists have found walls covered in intricate hieroglyphic texts and vivid paintings, a library of ritual knowledge left by pilgrims and priests. Yet the journey into the sacred did not end where the floor grew damp. Sections of the cave system lead to permanent pools and submerged tunnels, areas that fill and drain with the seasonal rains. It is in these watery anterooms that a different kind of offering has been found. During periods of a lower water table, Maya ritual specialists would venture into these damp chambers to conduct ceremonies, leaving behind pottery vessels, jade beads, and other precious objects as gifts to the lords of the underworld. The discovery of skeletal remains in these contexts is handled with immense respect by researchers, who see them not as artifacts but as individuals connected to profound ceremonial practices. These findings suggest that the water itself was the final conduit, a liquid pathway ensuring the offerings reached their intended destination in the spiritual realm below. Exploring these spaces today represents one of archaeology's most perilous frontiers. It requires the technical precision of cave diving, navigating tight, pitch-black passages with zero visibility, combined with the delicate methodology of an excavation. A single errant fin kick can cloud the water for hours, destroying the context of a site or damaging a fragile artifact resting in the silt for over 1,000 years. This high-risk work transforms the archaeologist into a kind of modern-day pilgrim, moving with reverence through the same physical and spiritual landscape as the Maya priests once did. Each carefully recovered object, a shell, a carved stone, or a piece of worked bone, is a direct message from that worldview, a testament to a cosmology where every element of the natural world was alive with meaning. The submerged sections of Naj Tunish underscore a universal theme we have seen from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, that water was never just a physical barrier or a resource. In Mesoamerican belief, it was a living, sacred entity, the blood of the earth and the road to the divine. To dive into these cenotes and flooded caves is not to plunder a tomb, but to respectfully enter a cathedral, one where the architecture is formed by dripping stone and silent pools, and where every offering left in the dark water was an act of communication with the very heart of creation. A city's true reach often extended beyond its visible walls into the waters that carried its wealth. On the sun-baked plains of the Peloponnese in Greece, the rediscovery of the ancient city of Tenia solved a long-standing historical mystery. Known primarily from myth and scattered references, Tenia was said to have been founded by prisoners taken after the Trojan War, a community that grew into a prosperous and independent power. Excavations on land have revealed a wealthy urban center with elaborate mosaics, a vast cemetery, and evidence of thriving commerce. But for a city described as fabulously rich from trade, a critical piece of the puzzle was missing: its connection to the sea. This is where the story dives beneath the surface. While the city's core sits inland, archaeological surveys along the nearby Corinthian Gulf coastline have begun to identify anomalies, structures, and potential harbor works now submerged just offshore. These are not the drowned streets of a metropolis, but the submerged infrastructure of its economic engine, the docks, warehouses, and breakwaters that served as Tenia's gateway to the wider Mediterranean world. This discovery perfectly illustrates a fundamental truth in archaeology: that a settlement cannot be fully understood by its land-based remains alone. Its economic lifeblood flowed through maritime channels, and those channels, over centuries of coastal change, often slip beneath the waves. The potential harbor of Tenia represents a hidden chapter, a physical extension of the city built to manage the flow of goods, from fine pottery and textiles to metals and wine, that fueled its prosperity. Investigating these underwater features completes the circuit. It shows how terrestrial digs and marine surveys are two halves of a single story. A mosaic floor in a merchant's villa speaks of luxury, but the submerged stone mooring block tells us how the luxury arrived. This interconnected approach transforms our understanding of ancient networks. Tenia was not an isolated inland power. It was a node in a vast, pulsating web of maritime trade, its influence and income dependent on its ability to send and receive ships. The slow submergence of its port facilities, likely due to seismic activity and gradual sea level rise, did not erase that role. It simply archived it in a different medium. So the next time you hear of a major archaeological find on land, remember to look toward the nearest coastline. The most telling evidence of how that city lived, how it connected, and how it thrived may be waiting in the silent blue corridors just offshore, where the land finally yields to the sea. The River Thames is more than a waterway, it is a liquid archive. For 2,000 years, the heart of London has beaten along its banks, and with every expansion, every new wharf or revetment built to claim more land from the water, a piece of the city's history was left behind, sinking into the thick, anaerobic mud. This is not the archaeology of a single sunken city, but of a continuous submerged timeline, a record of relentless urban growth written in waterlogged wood. From the straight, sturdy timbers of a Roman jetty to the complex, crisscrossing foundations of a Tudor dock, these structures lie stacked upon each other in the riverbed, a physical chronicle of London's evolving ambition. Each timber was a declaration, a statement that the city was reaching further, trading more, and demanding more from its river. The preservation is remarkable, for the same oxygen-starved silt that swallowed these structures also protected them from rot, freezing the moment of their construction or abandonment in perfect detail. To pull a medieval plank from this mud is to hold a piece of the city's skeleton, a direct connection to the hands that shaped it. But the true story is told in the smaller, quieter finds, the objects lost overboard or deliberately discarded. A Roman stylus for writing on wax tablets slipped from a merchant's hand, a perfectly preserved leather shoe from the 15th century, its wear patterns telling of long days on cobbled streets. A delicate Tudor trading token, a small coin-like object that facilitated everyday purchases. Each one is a micro-story, a fleeting moment of daily life in a metropolis that was always looking outward. These sunken wharves chart more than construction techniques. They map the pulse of global connection. The artifacts found in their shadows speak of a world brought to London's doorstep, from German stoneware to Italian glass, from spices of the East to furs from the Baltic. The riverfront was the city's loading dock to the world, and every expansion, every new wooden platform built further into the current, was an investment in that global conversation. This urban underwater archaeology reveals a history of constant negotiation with the river, a dance of claiming and being reclaimed. It shows a city that did not simply exist beside its river, but was fundamentally built from it, layer by ambitious layer, each generation leaving its mark in timber and mud for the next to discover, a submerged blueprint of endless reinvention. High in the mountains that divide two nations, Lake Kivu holds a deep and silent mystery. This vast body of water, nestled in the volcanic Rift Valley of Central Africa, is known for its stunning beauty and its unique, potentially dangerous geology, harboring massive reservoirs of dissolved gases. Yet beneath its placid surface, another secret may lie dormant. Along its shores, local communities have passed down stories for generations, tales of a time when the land extended further, of places now claimed by the water. Fishermen occasionally report their nets snagging on what feel like stone walls or regular structures in the deeper, darker parts of the lake. These persistent accounts point to the possibility of the 24th sunken settlement on our journey, a place where folklore and the restless earth intertwine. The theory is compelling. The entire Great Rift Valley is a zone of immense geological activity where tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart. This stretching, combined with the region's volatile volcanic forces, can cause sections of land to subside or fault lines to shift. It is entirely plausible that over centuries, portions of Lake Kivu's shoreline have sunk, gradually allowing the water to advance over villages, ceremonial sites, or places of gathering. Unlike a sudden tsunami or a deliberate flood, this would have been a slow transformation, a creeping change that might have allowed communities to retreat but would have permanently altered their landscape and their memory of it. The potential structures spoken of in legend, sometimes described as the drowned churches or buildings, are not likely grand cathedrals in a European sense. Instead, they may represent the stone foundations of important communal spaces, places where people gathered for spiritual practice, for counsel, or for trade long before colonial borders were drawn. Discovering and documenting such sites could revolutionize our understanding of pre-colonial Central African societies along the lake. These communities are often underrepresented in the historical record. Their complex social structures and adaptations to this dramatic environment waiting to be read from the archaeological evidence. A preserved underwater site here could reveal patterns of trade, architectural styles, and daily life completely unique to this high-altitude Rift Valley environment. However, Lake Kivu represents a formidable frontier for underwater archaeology. The lake's great depth and its unusual gaseous layers present significant logistical and safety challenges for extended diving operations. Furthermore, the region's complex history and political landscape have, until recently, made large-scale systematic surveys difficult to organize. This means the lake's secrets remain protected by more than just water. They are guarded by practical reality. Yet, this inaccessibility is what makes the potential so electrifying. Here, myth is not yet separated from fact. The fisherman's story is still the primary source, and the possibility of a major discovery feels palpably close. It is a reminder that the map of sunken human history is still being drawn, and some of its most significant chapters may be written in the most challenging places. Lake Kivu stands as a symbol of patience, a deep, quiet archive holding the stories of mountain communities who lived with the breath of volcanoes and the slow, inevitable movement of the earth, their legacy resting in the dark, waiting for the moment when science and story finally dive in together. The deep sea guards its secrets with a perfect, disorienting ambiguity. Beyond the compelling structures associated with Dwarka in the Gulf of Cambay, sonar scans and exploratory dives have hinted at something even more cryptic resting on the dark seabed. Reports describe lines of what appear to be large stone jars or dense clusters of pottery-like shapes settled at depths that challenge easy investigation. These are not the clear foundations of a city, but scattered, enigmatic forms that resist immediate explanation. Their very existence plunges us into the most challenging frontier of underwater archaeology, the realm where human artifact and geological accident become almost indistinguishable. The environment here is a master of illusion, where centuries of sediment deposition, strong currents, and unique mineral formations can sculpt the seafloor into shapes that mock human handiwork. What a diver's eye might interpret as a purposeful line of storage vessels could, upon closer scientific scrutiny, be a row of concretions, where minerals have naturally cemented around a core object over millennia, creating eerily symmetrical shapes. The pressure to interpret, to find pattern and purpose in the murk, is a powerful force, one that every researcher must consciously resist. This is why such findings remain highly speculative and often controversial within the scientific community. They exemplify a fundamental rule of deep water exploration. Extraordinary claims require not just evidence, but evidence that can withstand the relentless skepticism of natural processes. A single photograph or sonar image is rarely enough. The context of the surrounding geology, the composition of the material, and the precise arrangement must all be analyzed before a whisper of human origin can be taken seriously. Yet, it is precisely these unresolved whispers that drive the field forward. The tantalizing possibility that a line of jars could represent a lost ritual site or a sunken merchant's cargo pushes engineers to develop more sensitive sensors, brighter deep sea lights, and robotic manipulators with a finer touch. Each ambiguous sonar blip is a challenge to our technology, daring us to see clearer, dive deeper, and understand more. These mysteries, whether they are ultimately proven to be natural or human, serve a vital purpose. They humble our assumptions and stretch our imagination. They remind us that the ocean floor is not a static museum with neatly labeled exhibits, but a dynamic, mysterious landscape that may hold forms of human expression we have not yet learned to recognize. The stone jars of the Gulf of Cambay, real or imagined, stand as symbols of the ocean's enduring power to perplex, promising that the last word on our sunken history is never truly written, only waiting in the dark for a better light. A continent sleeps beneath the stormy waves of the North Sea. Doggerland was not a city, but an entire lost world, a sprawling, fertile landscape that for thousands of years connected the British Isles to the coasts of Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. This was the heartland of Mesolithic Europe, a verdant plain of rolling hills, meandering rivers, dense forests, and marshy lagoons, home to nomadic communities of hunter-gatherers who followed the migrations of deer and wild boar. Then, as the great ice sheets melted, the seas began their relentless rise. Around 6,500 years before the Common Era, the final uplands of Doggerland were swallowed, severing Britain from the continent and silencing a complete chapter of human prehistory beneath the cold, grey water. This vast inundation represents the most extensive sunken settlement of all, a lost territory whose story is not written in stone walls, but in the mud itself and the fragments pulled from it. For generations, fishermen trawling the Dogger Bank, a shallow underwater plateau, have made strange catches amid their nets of cod and sole. Along with the fish, they have hauled up the bones of mammoths and lions, antlers of giant elk, and most tellingly, finely worked flint tools, barbed bone points for fishing, and even fragments of amber jewelry. These are not shipwreck debris, but the scattered belongings of a drowned landscape, surfacing from a world that vanished millennia ago. Each tool is a direct message, proof that human hands once shaped this stone on dry land where now only currents flow. Modern science has given this ghostly continent a shape, using seismic survey data originally gathered for oil and gas exploration. researchers have painstakingly mapped the sunken topography of Doggerland. The scans reveal a hauntingly familiar geography, the ghostly outlines of ancient river valleys like the Shotten River, winding their way across the seabed, along with submerged lakes, hills, and even coastlines. This data allows us to visualize with startling clarity the environment these lost communities knew, a rich mosaic of resources that supported their way of life. We can trace the likely paths they walked, from forested high grounds to rich fishing grounds at river confluences. The story of Doggerland's end is one of slow retreat rather than sudden catastrophe. As the sea level rose inch by inch over centuries, salt water would have encroached upon freshwater marshes, pushing communities steadily inland, compressing their territory year after year. The rising waters would have transformed hunting grounds into mudflats and forests into brackish swamps, forcing a constant generational adaptation. The final submergence was likely a gradual drowning, a final surrender of the last persistent islands to the waves. This makes Doggerland a profound lesson in human resilience and displacement. These communities were masters of their environment, yet they were ultimately powerless against a planetary-scale change they could not comprehend. Their experience echoes forward as a deep-time precedent for the challenges faced by coastal peoples today, a reminder that the map of the world has never been fixed and that the ocean's claim on the land is a recurring theme in the human story. The Lost Land is more than a scientific curiosity. It is a foundational memory for Northern Europe, a sunken homeland that shaped the genetic and cultural landscape of the continent. Its silent rivers, now traced only by sonar, and its scattered tools, resting in museum cases, form a bridge to a time when the North Sea was a valley, and the island of Britain was simply the western high ground of a world we are still learning to remember. The legend spoke of 7 magnificent towers, where only one now stands against the Indian Ocean's spray. For centuries, the people of Mahabalipuram told of the 7 pagodas, a glorious group of temples built by the Pallava dynasty, of which only the iconic shore temple remained visible on the beach. The other 6, the stories insisted, were claimed long ago by a wrathful sea, their spires lost beneath the waves as punishment for pride. It was a poetic tale, a way to explain the solitary grandeur of the surviving temple, until the ocean itself decided to offer proof. In December 2004, a catastrophic tsunami drew back the waters with unimaginable force along the coast of Tamil Nadu. For a few brief, surreal minutes, the sea retreated hundreds of feet, and local fishermen stared in awe at a sight generations had only spoken of. There, exposed on the newly revealed seabed, lay the outlines of man-made structures, fallen walls, rows of stone blocks, and the distinct foundations of what appeared to be ancient temples. The tsunami's immense power, which brought such hardship to the region, also performed a grim and fleeting act of archaeological revelation, pulling back the curtain on a lost world. Subsequent scientific surveys by marine archaeologists confirmed the discovery. Using sonar and diving expeditions, they mapped extensive ruins spread across the seafloor directly in front of the shore temple. These included a large, collapsed stone wall, scattered pillars, and the remains of other religious structures, all consistent with the architecture of the Pallava period from the 7th and 8th centuries. The evidence strongly suggests these are not random shipwrecks or natural formations, but the remains of a substantial port complex and its accompanying temples, a thriving spiritual and commercial hub that extended far beyond today's shoreline. This confirms the core truth within the folklore, not as a moral fable of divine punishment, but as a cultural memory of a real geological event. The submergence was likely gradual, exacerbated by coastal erosion, and perhaps a major storm surge centuries ago, slowly drowning the Pallava's architectural marvels until only the shore temple was left as a sentinel. The moment of exposure in 2004 is a profound paradox of history. It showed how a force of nature capable of immense loss can also, in a single breath, become an agent of discovery, inadvertently verifying stories passed down for over 1,000 years. The submerged ruins of Mahabalipuram stand as a testament to the endurance of oral tradition, proving that legends are often the keepers of long-forgotten facts, waiting patiently for the day the sea briefly looks away. The word Sybarite, meaning a person devoted to luxury and pleasure, comes directly from a city that was erased from the map. Sybaris, a Greek colony founded on the fertile toe of Italy's boot, was not just wealthy, it became a byword for opulence in the ancient world. Its citizens were said to sleep on rose petals, to pipe wine through aqueducts directly to their homes, and to outlaw noisy trades within the city so their sleep would never be disturbed. This reputation for decadence made it a target, and in 510 before the Common Era, its rival Croton marched an army to its gates. The story goes that the Sybarites trained their horses to dance to flute music, a charming spectacle that became their undoing. The cunning Crotonians simply played flutes as they advanced, causing the Sybarite cavalry horses to break into dance, throwing their riders into chaos and leading to a swift, total defeat. The victorious Crotonians then diverted the Crati River over the ruins, ensuring the city was not just sacked but buried. For centuries, Sybaris was considered a myth, a moral fable about the dangers of excess. Then, in the 1960s, aerial photography revealed the faint, geometric outlines of a city beneath the fields. Excavators had to pump out groundwater constantly as they dug through nearly 20 feet of alluvial clay, the very sediment the river had deposited to seal its victory. What they found confirmed the legends of prosperity, vast urban planning with wide streets and sophisticated drainage, but the search for its true heart leads to the water's edge. While the city center lies under farmland, archaeologists suspect its economic engine, the bustling port that connected its legendary agricultural wealth to the wider Mediterranean, may extend into the now submerged coastline. This creates a unique puzzle, a site split between two worlds. On land, the clay-preserved foundations speak of urban design. Offshore, the potential harbor works, now underwater, could reveal how this wealth arrived and departed. The river that drowned the city also preserved it, creating an anaerobic seal that protected organic materials much like the silts of a lake bed. To understand Sybaris fully, one must think like the river and the sea, following the logic of how sediment moves and where a harbor would naturally be. Its story is a layered lesson in how nature collaborates with human conflict to obscure history. The river was weaponized by Croton to enact a symbolic erasure, a final humiliation for a city that prized comfort above all. Yet that same act of burial became an act of preservation, saving the city from the looting and stone robbing that befell so many other ancient sites. The search for its sunken port is therefore a search for context, for the tangible mechanisms of that fabled luxury. It reminds us that the boundaries we draw between land and underwater archaeology are often arbitrary, lines on a map that the past does not recognize. A city's story flows from its fields to its wharves, and sometimes to find the beginning, you must follow the current to where the land finally slips beneath the waves. The scale of human ambition finds its starkest measure not in what we build, but in what we choose to submerge. The Three Gorges Dam across China's Yangtze River is an engineering marvel of the modern age, a wall of concrete that holds back a reservoir stretching for over 600 kilometers. Its creation promised flood control for millions and a massive supply of renewable energy, a vision of taming one of the world's great rivers for the benefit of a nation. Yet this vision required a breathtaking sacrifice, the deliberate, permanent flooding of an entire river valley steeped in human history. As the reservoir waters slowly rose, they did not merely cover modern towns and farmlands, they enveloped a layered timeline of Chinese civilization, from ancient Han Dynasty tombs resting in the cliffs to Ming and Qing Dynasty temples nestled in the river bends. This was not an act of nature but a conscious, planned transformation, making it the single largest deliberate inundation of cultural heritage in recorded history. Before the waters arrived, archaeologists engaged in a monumental race against time, a project of salvage on an almost unimaginable scale. Teams worked frantically to document and excavate what they could, moving some structures stone by stone to higher ground, recovering thousands of artifacts from soon-to-be-lost villages. They mapped forgotten burial sites and recorded the precise locations of historical markers, knowing these coordinates would soon point only to deep, silent water. This effort was an act of respectful preservation, an acknowledgement that progress, however necessary, should not erase memory without first making a record. The reservoir now serves as a deep, freshwater archive, its cold, dark layers preserving the wood and stone of drowned communities in a state of suspended animation. Modern apartment blocks, factory foundations, and paved roads now lie alongside the older strata of history, creating a singular archaeological site where the 20th century rests directly atop the second. This submerged landscape presents a profound and complex legacy. It is a testament to modern priorities, where the needs of a vast population were weighed against the tangible connections to a regional past. The relocations affected millions of people, a social upheaval documented in news reports and personal stories of loss and new beginnings. For archaeologists, the reservoir is a place of both deep regret and unique opportunity. While countless sites were lost to the flood, the very act of inundation protected others from looting, urban sprawl, and the slow decay of exposure, sealing them in a stable, aquatic environment. It forces us to sit with a difficult truth that preservation and loss are sometimes two sides of the same deliberate choice. The silent villages beneath the Yangtze are a monument to this modern paradox, a reminder that the maps of our future are often drawn in water, over the quiet footprints of countless yesterdays. A final mystery rests not in the saltwater of an ancient sea, but in the deep, cold freshwater of Lake Michigan. Here, a controversial sonar image has ignited a modern debate that perfectly captures the spirit of our entire journey. The scans appear to show a collection of large stones resting on the lakebed, arranged in what some observers describe as a rough, circular pattern reminiscent of ancient megalithic sites. One of these stones, when later examined by divers, seemed to bear markings that looked uncannily like a carved depiction of a mastodon, a creature that vanished from North America over 10,000 years ago. The implications of such a find are quite literally earth-shaking. If these stones were placed by human hands and that carving is genuine, it would suggest a presence of sophisticated, monument-building cultures in the heart of the continent thousands of years earlier than established theories allow. It would force a complete rewrite of the prehistory of North America, pointing to a time when the Great Lakes Basin looked very different, and the people who lived there left their mark in ways we are only beginning to perceive. This is the kind of discovery that fuels dreams and best-selling books, a portal to a forgotten chapter. Yet, the scientific community responds with a necessary and sobering caution. Geologists point to the powerful, sculpting force of the glaciers that once covered this region. As those immense ice sheets advanced and retreated, they could have dragged and deposited these very stones, creating seemingly aligned patterns through entirely natural, if dramatic, processes. The markings on the so-called mastodon stone could be the result of centuries of underwater erosion, mineral staining, or the random scratches left by glacial debris, our pattern-seeking brains imposing the image of an animal where none was intended. This rigorous skepticism is not a dismissal of wonder, but the essential foundation of the discipline. Extraordinary claims, as the saying goes, require extraordinary evidence. In the dim, silent world of the deep lake, where light is scarce and currents can deceive, the standard for proof must be exceptionally high. Every potential artifact must be weighed against the boundless creativity of natural forces. The Lake Michigan site, therefore, is more than a potential archaeological wonder. It is a living classroom for the scientific method, a case study in how we navigate the thrilling space between what might be true and what we can definitively prove. This tension is what makes underwater archaeology so perpetually compelling. It lives in that breathless moment between the sonar ping and the final, verified interpretation. The public imagination is drawn to the possibility of the mastodon carving, to the vision of a lost Stonehenge beneath the waves, because it speaks to a deep human desire to find connection and meaning in the landscape. Scientists are drawn to the mystery for the opposite but equally human reason, to test that desire against the unyielding standards of evidence, to ensure that our story of the past is built on bedrock, not on wishful shadows. Both impulses are vital. One drives exploration and keeps the sense of wonder alive. The other ensures that the stories we tell are as true as we can possibly make them. The dark waters of Lake Michigan hold their secret close for now. Whether this site is a masterpiece of glacial coincidence or a genuine monument from a lost time, its greatest lesson is universal. It reminds us that the past is always more complex and surprising than we assume, and that the final word on history is often waiting in the last place we think to look, resting in the quiet dark, patiently waiting for us to learn how to see. Across these 30 sunken worlds, a pattern emerges from the deep, a rhythm of loss that connects continents and millennia. The reasons a settlement slips beneath the waves are as revealing as the artifacts left behind, each cause writing its own signature into the silt. Tectonic activity, the slow grinding of the planet's plates, does not merely shake the ground, it can lower it permanently, as seen in the gradual drowning of Pavlopetri or the sunken villas of Baiae. This leaves a city often intact but tilted, its streets and buildings preserved in situ, a community frozen in the act of being lowered into a watery grave. In stark contrast, the violent, sudden force of an earthquake followed by a tsunami, as at Port Royal or perhaps Heracleion, creates an archaeological snapshot of pure catastrophe. Here, the story is one of instant interruption, of watches stopped at the moment of impact and daily life violently suspended, offering a heartbreakingly precise window into a single day in history. Then there is the patient, inexorable force of climate. The steady rise of sea levels following the last ice age was not a future threat, but a past reality that reshaped the human world. This process, measured in inches per generation, drowned the hunting forests of Doggerland and the freshwater wells of Atlit Yam, forcing slow retreats and cultural adaptation over centuries. The archaeological signature here is one of gradual abandonment, a story told in layers of sediment that show a community struggling against a rising tide until the final decision to leave. This ancient echo of environmental change finds a modern parallel in the deliberate flooding of landscapes for human progress. The reservoir drownings of Shi Cheng, Lake Murray, and the Three Gorges represent a conscious choice, a trade of heritage for hydroelectricity. These sites present a unique challenge, their ruins often cleared and managed before inundation, creating sterile, modern time capsules that speak more of 20th century priorities than of organic community life. Recognizing these patterns does more than satisfy historical curiosity. It becomes a practical tool. By understanding that post-glacial sea level rise drowned certain coastlines, archaeologists can predict where to search for Neolithic settlements, tracing the ancient shorelines now far offshore. Knowing that seismic zones are likely to host sunken ports guides surveys in regions like the Mediterranean. This pattern recognition weaves these 30 disparate sites into a single, global narrative, a story of human vulnerability and incredible resilience. From the earliest farmers watching their fields turn saline to the modern engineers calculating the cost of a dam, our relationship with water has always been a negotiation between ambition and adaptation. The sea, the river, and the lake are not just backdrops to history. They are active participants, partners, and adversaries in the long human story of finding a place to call home, and sometimes learning how to let that place go. From the oldest streets of Pavlopetri to the modern ruins under Lake Murray, these 30 sunken settlements form a mosaic of human history, each tile laid by the water itself. They are not isolated curiosities but connected points on a vast, submerged map of human experience. This collective story whispers a humbling truth that civilizations, for all their marble and might, are transient guests upon a dynamic stage. The ground can sink, the seas can rise, and the rivers we harness can turn and reclaim their shores. Water, the very element that nourished these communities, also became the quiet architect of their preservation, gifting them to a future they could never have envisioned. Underwater archaeology is the key to this liquid archive, a discipline that allows us to reclaim these lost chapters not as myths, but as measurable reality. Through its meticulous work, we gain more than a list of drowned places. We gain profound insight into the universal currents of human life. We see the intricate networks of ancient trade in the Chinese porcelain at Port Royal and the coral stone of Isla. We witness cultural exchange in the fused deities of Heracleion and the ritual labyrinths of Lake Wonga. We confront the sobering reality of disaster, both natural and human-made, from the earthquake frozen in a pocket watch to the valleys deliberately flooded for progress. Most intimately, we are granted a window into daily life, from the wooden bowl in a Scottish crannog to the footprints of a hunter in a Welsh forest. These are the stories the water kept safe. As sonar grows sharper and robotics more delicate, the map of this sunken world will only expand. The dark anoxic depths of the Black Sea, the deep freshwater of Lake Kivu, and the vast continental shelf of Doggerland promise that this is not the end of the story, but an ongoing revelation. Every new ping from a deep-sea sensor is a potential first chapter waiting to be read. Which of these 30 sunken worlds resonated most deeply with you? Was it the luxurious tragedy of Baiae, the spiritual mystery of the Maya caves, or the modern, deliberate loss beneath the Three Gorges reservoir? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to continue diving with us into history's greatest mysteries, where every discovery is a message in a bottle from a shore that vanished long ago.